Hello, people. Welcome back to another episode of the Navvai Shift. Today, I'm joined with my co-host Darnell, and we have a guest today. He is part of Shieldpay. He is the Chief Technology and Product Officer, and his name goes by Digi. Adu. Digi, how are you? You well?
I'm good, thanks. Yes. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, no, all good, all good. Thank you very much. So, could you give us a brief introduction to who you are and your role at Shieldpay?
Yeah, so I'm Digi Adu. I've got about 25 years of experience in financial services and technology. Started out as a software developer many years ago. Lots of my experience has been in financial services sector, but also some experience in the consulting sector. And then spent time moved into software architecture, a bit of enterprise architecture, then started managing software engineering and technology teams. And over time, eventually became the CTO at Shieldpay, where I've been for the last couple of years. But my experience has been, like I said, mostly in banking. So I've been with a lot of big banks like HSBC, Barclays, as well as investment banks like Goldman Sachs as well.
Digi, you got a similar sound sound like a mini Darnell.
What I'm aspiring to be anyway.
What you're aspiring to be. That's absolutely right. Digi, ShieldPay isn't just a processing payments. It's a building platform to handle complex, high value, and often cross-border transactions. Can you talk us through what the platform architecture looks like behind the scenes?
Yeah, sure. So the thing about Shieldpay and what we do when we talk about complex high value transactions, it's quite different from banking. We don't do lots of high volume traffic. So when I was in the retail bank, you're talking about millions of low value payments. And what we tend to do is more thousands of, or sometimes hundreds of thousands of high value payments. So, and our flow is not, it's not a consistent volume. So it goes in spikes and troughs. So we use a serverless architecture because of that. So we need that elasticity to be able to scale. So we've got things like, so most of our application infrastructure is AWS. We use EKS, which is Elastic Kubernetes, to allow us to scale containers. And we also use a lot of Lambda functions for our microservices architecture. So we've got a microservices architecture. We are a TypeScript to Node.js backend with a React front end for our application side. And like I said, we've got lots of Lambda functions for serverless, and we've also got Elastic Kubernetes for container scaling. And our databases, again, we've got a mixture of NoSQL and SQL databases. So we do have a number of RDS databases as well as DynamoDB and AWS for certain processes and functions. And then alongside that, we have our data warehouse in Google Cloud. So we have a cloud-to-cloud pipeline where we stream all our data into Google Cloud, into BigQuery, and we do all our analytics on Google with BigQuery.
Well, I must say, I think one word that comes to me is a Shieldpay system is definitely robust. And on the last podcast, Sophie was she mentioned basically how there's a lot of moving parts to Shieldpay. And I did want to ask, how have you designed a product to handle multi-party approval chains, escrow needs, and I think the main thing that we also spoke about was the human interface and obviously just making it as user-friendly as possible. So how do you ensure it's still user-friendly, but still having all these multifaceted aspects?
Yeah, it's a great point. And when you're designing architecture, you got to think about the interactions, right? And these type of transactions are usually multi-party. So you've got law firms who are part of the transaction, but they're actually not involved in the transaction, if that makes sense. So they need visibility. And then you've got the actual parties, like within M&A, it's the acquirers, it's shareholders. And so you've got this kind of multi-party architecture. So what we think about a lot is how we make data available for visibility and transparency quickly, whilst restricting the right capabilities to the relevant folks. So one of the key, and all these different types of transactions all have this foundational capabilities, right? which is how we're able to scale it across the different types of products we have. So all the transactions need some element of verification. So we have a suite of verification services that are responsible for verifying different types. And it gets quite complex. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's, depending on who's contracted, who's not contracted, whether they're paying money in or paying money out, we've got to essentially do the right types of verification. And then we've got to take money in and hold it for as long as is needed for all the various contractual bits to happen, which is our kind of hold functionality, which for escrows could be years, but for other types of transactions, literally within a day, it could be minutes, it could be hours. And then we've got an architecture that allows us to make out payments via multiple parties, multiple banking partners, I should say, right? So depending on the types of transactions, the jurisdictions, currencies, then we select the appropriate rails to then send the money out. And whilst doing all of this, what's important is that the status of all these things are fed back into the system, into somewhere that's then we make visible via dashboard, so everyone involved in the transaction can have visibility into where the transaction is. So that kind of suite of capabilities allows us to work across all the different product types that we have.
That's an exceptional take. I wanted to get like an example of like where the platform has helped, reduce admin or coordination friction to when clients are like handling complex transactions.
Yeah. So complex can be defined in many ways. Like I said, multi-party. I think the simplest one to talk about is something like a litigation, where you'd have maybe thousands of claimants that you need to pay out to, or tens of thousands, usually sometimes hundreds of thousands. Now, when you want to pay out to these people, a typical payment platform just requires you to provide the information required to pay and pay out. Now, for us, because it's illegal, you need to validate that the person you're paying is actually the person who should receive the money. So that's an additional, so it's not ID&V or KYC. It's like someone has made a claim, they've given you some details. We need to verify that that person is the person who should be receiving the money and the money is going to them. So there's an additional step there. And the way that would happen in the old days is you basically get a team of people in a room and they'd have to ring up everyone or email them, validate that. And that's the way it used to work before Shieldpay. It was literally a manual process. With our platform, once we've got all the claimants' details, they give us their full name, and the email address and address. And those are things that are already verified. And our system will email out to everyone, ask them to put in their information. We verify that against the data we already have. For account information, we use tools like confirmation of payee. We used to use open banking as well to validate that it's the person who has successfully claimed whose account we're paying into. And then once that's verified, we automatically then pay out. And all of that is automated. So something that literally used to take weeks, actually our process will get it done within a day or two.
No, that's amazing. Because just the fact that you've automated it from end to end, that's really an achievement itself. But you was just touching on a bit of like a regulatory standpoint, and I think that can be the bane of our life sometimes. Obviously, we've spoken to multiple people and we've seen that like visibility and auditability, they've been cited as like pain points quite often. So I do want to ask Digi, how does Shieldpay's platform improve transparency across like, different stakeholders and counterparties?
Yeah, transparency is a key one for us. And when we're regulated, transparency is a key part of that as well. We have two things that I think help with that. So one is we have an authorization step that requires a party to authorize the payment. So it's a kind of you think of like a human in the loop step, right? So even though you could fully automate everything, that step just makes sure that there is some visibility and transparency into, now the payments are going out and this person is the one authorizing it. And then the second part of that is, and we just launched this last year, we had to build a separate dashboard. So we have our platform with our main app, and then we built a dashboard which allows our contracted clients to share that dashboard with any interested parties. And those parties get a read-only view into what's going on in transactions, so they can see verification statuses, payment statuses, and see where So essentially see where the state of the payments are. And that's an interesting one because they will share it with other parties who might be involved, but not necessarily contracted with us to use the platform.
How long did it take for you guys to build out that platform?
The conversation started with a sales guy in a pub, as all good product conversations start. And I think we were talking about it, I think maybe December, and then we had it out by July last year. So I'd say about 6 months, but it wasn't 6 months of build effort. It's, it's just one of those things where we're thinking about it, we're building, we're iterating, we're testing it out. And that was part of our transition to our data warehouse in GCP, right? So that dashboard feeds off that. So it's actually interesting because now we have an architecture where we feed all our data into BigQuery, and that allows us to then build different types of insights and derive insights from that data without any performance implication on our application, which is running in AWS. So that was the solution we went to, and the first product of that was the Insights dashboard, which runs solely off that data warehouse.
So does that data warehouse then allow like flexibility for different use cases then? So like, for example, like M&A, litigation, etc.
It allows flexibility for reporting on different use cases. Yes, I think our application itself is what gives us the flexibility because we've designed it around capabilities. And I say that now because the first version of the application wasn't that. It was literally you'd choose what you wanted to do. I want to do an M&A. I want to do litigation. I want to do client monies. And then there was code, the old school way, code that ran based on each option. But like I said, now we've built a new platform based on capabilities. We have verification capabilities and a set of microservices that do verification. We have payment in capabilities and settlements, essentially tracking payments in and making sure that the right payments go into the right accounts. That's a suite of services, and our treasury services. Then we've got some payment services, and that is more like an orchestrator and a set of adapters. Because like I said, we use multiple banking partners, depending on the currency and the country and jurisdiction. And so we've got these suite of adapters. We work with a lot of third parties, so we have a lot of adapters in our architecture. And so by having that kind of flexible architecture, it doesn't matter if you're doing an M&A or some other form of complex transaction, all those microservices and those capabilities work together to deliver the functionality.
Nice. So how do you approach scalability? Like particularly when dealing with sensitive workflows that require precision, control, and uptime. Like, how do you guys approach that?
Yeah, so I think with cloud and being cloud native is it helps a lot with that, right? So the first thing we have is obviously we use multi-region AWS to think about resilience first. I know you asked about scalability. And then with scalability, again, we use, like I said earlier, serverless microservices. So that gives us the flexibility to scale up and down really quickly with our infrastructure. And then also by thinking about piping our data, essentially every event that happens, we're piping the data out to GCP separately, which then allows us to do read actions via GCP, so separate infrastructure, again, which gives us the flexibility on our right side, our architecture, to be able to scale, or let me rephrase that, our read to be able to scale without impacting our write. So you can have more people reading and accessing the data without impacting the scale that's required for the people who are actually making transactions and putting data in.
I wanted to go on to more in and around building like trust with automation, in regulated environments. I know we've heard from, speaking with, CTOs, founders, that there's a lot of red tape that's in this industry. Yeah, you'll nod your head, so you understand it completely. Yeah. So in legal and, regulated industries, there's often healthy skepticism around automation. So how do you approach building trust when, introducing automation in sensitive payment flows?
Yeah, for us, it's a double-edged sword. There's two sets of regulations. So we are FCA regulated, so all the financial, and we are an API payment institution. So we've got all those regulations. A lot of our clients are law firms. They are SRA regulated. They've got their own sets of regulations to meet. So you've got to balance the two. I think the key thing is thinking about regulation in terms of innovation. So it almost forces your hand in terms of the things that need to be automated and the things that need manual intervention. So think, for example, for us, we had confirmation of payee, right? It's a regulatory requirement. And instead of thinking about it as, oh, this is just something we need to do because we're FCA regulated, what we've done is we've integrated confirmation of payee into our automation workflow and used that as part of our account validation process. So, right, we've taken confirmation of payee, which is a regulatory requirement, and said, now we're going to verify your account using confirmation of payee. That way we can give instant results back to the customer that, yes, this is a valid account because the name matching is a regulatory requirement. And we use that in our automation. So that's the kind of way to look at it. That's an easy example to say, yes, you can use regulation to help them to drive automation. It's not always that straightforward. Sometimes, you've got to take some what's one compromises.
Got you.
Like our payment authorization, like I said, it's still manual.
Got you.
So we can't simply just say payments of hundreds of millions of pounds can just go straight out someone. We've got to, then this is an SRA regulation. They have something called a release instruction. We've got to have an interjection where someone has to say, yes, I approve this money to go out. And that means we just can't have full straight through for those kind of payments.
So from what I'm getting, obviously you've mentioned like compromises, and I feel like you have to obviously build some type of controls and fail safes. And I just wanted to get a little bit insight into that.
Yeah. So you mean controls and fail safes in the architecture or in the process?
Mainly in the architecture.
Sorry.
In the architecture.
Yeah, in the architecture, yes. So one of the things that we've had to build in is this OTP process and architecture. It's especially for API integration, it's a bit of a challenge. So in our workflow, at some point when we need authorization, actually we've got to send out an OTP code. And our workflow essentially stops until that OTP has been verified, which is a manual process. So what we've got to think about in architecture is almost like steps-based, which is the compromise, right? So where typically you could build something that's fully automated straight through end to end. With us, we've got to break everything down into steps and almost interject where regulation is required before you can proceed to the next step. And it's a challenge, but it's what we've got to do, and it's kind of what we've built and what we're used to now.
Yeah, I can imagine that you guys are facing, I don't want to say a lot of challenges, but with automation, there are sometimes challenges that you have to overcome. Like, for example, balancing, human oversight with automation. So particularly in areas like you've mentioned it, KYC, AML, distribute and scheduling, or distribute resolution. How are you guys handling that human oversight and automation on those side of things?
Yeah, so we try and automate as much as possible, as you said. So with AML, KYC is a good one. So we have third-party platforms that we're integrated with that provide some level of automation for that. So there's ones for KYB businesses, ones for KYC, and we have a set of adapters that we've built and an orchestration layer that can ping out to all these services. And then what we've built is really an exceptions process. So we have a good understanding of what our exceptions rate is. Let's say it's, for some use cases, it's 0.2, very small for some use cases, up to as much as 1%. And so there's a dashboard which our ops team will have access to, where they only have to deal with the exceptions. So they can review the automated acceptances, but they don't have to take any actions on them. Those will just flow through straight away. And the rest essentially go through to an exceptions dashboard where they can go through, process the exceptions. One of the things we have to do, again, for AML, KYC is documentation, need additional documentation. So we had to build a separate functionality for document upload as a kind of side application where we can say, oh, sorry, we need some additional documentation from you. Send a link or a request, upload it here or email it to this secure link, and then allow that manual process to carry on. And then that platform, when you mark the person is verified, then the trigger, the webhook then comes back into our platform and say they're now verified. Then we update the status and then the rest of the process carries on.
I can see that Shieldpay are keeping you busy, Digi.
Yeah.
I do want to also ask, so obviously you have all these like robust systems. So how do you actually test them and do performance monitoring just to ensure that everything's running smoothly?
Yeah, testing is a big one for us. We have a test team who are separate essentially from the dev teams so that they have some level of autonomy. And we do stress testing as well as the performance testing, load testing. And so there's two parts of it. One, when we initially build something new, we want to understand our limits. So we do stress testing, find out what our limits are. We capture that and we say, this is what we can do. And then we have the performance test where we'll have some SLAs we need to meet. So let's say we need to make X number of payments within an hour. And then we need to figure out where our bottlenecks is. So we do a bunch of performance tests there, figure out where our bottlenecks is. That goes back into engineering to then try and see where we can resolve those issues. And so that's just an ongoing thing. So every time we build a new feature, we'll do end-to-end tests, stress tests, performance tests. And then when we have a go-to-market program, right, we're trying to launch a new thing, we expect some high volume. Then we'll also do our testing there just to make sure we understand what our limitations are as well.
Nice. I wanted to ask just in relation to like the dev team, like, is there any specific criteria you look for when you are, like getting new people on board within the
into our software engineering team, you mean? I don't think it's any different. The reason I'm hesitant is because I don't hire the engineers, right? My head of engineering hires the engineers. But again, I think there's a mindset thing, right? We need to think about when you're in regulated industry as an engineer, it can't just be about I've got to build the best thing, that's 100% works with all the latest tools. You have to have a mindset where you can understand this is a timeline. Regulatory requirements always have deadlines that we have to meet. We had a CHAPS deadline we had to meet, we had the COP deadline, APP fraud. All those things have hard deadlines. So you need to have a mindset where you can think of what's the optimal solution I can implement to meet this requirement that doesn't compromise too much on quality and performance, that allows me to meet the deadline. And I think we need that mindset from our engineers as well. And innovation, right? You've got to be able to take, like I said, with the COP example, take something that's a compliance requirement and think, how can I use this to innovate and create something different?
Nice.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I do want to ask Digi, so just kind of flipping the scripts a little bit. What's your view on where automation should stop, and when do you feel like it can go too far?
Yeah, so we're talking about automation here, but we haven't talked about AI, which is really the next level, right? I think there's automation where we have a workflow and we can code as much automation as possible. And like I said, with us, there's steps that require some intervention and some human coordination. And I think this is where AI starts to play a part in that. That intervention is where AI, especially agentic AI, can take over and actually provide an automation, but they act like a person in the automation, if that makes sense. So it's not coded, it's just, it knows that I need to wait for some interaction to happen over here, and it's looking out for that. When that interaction happens, then the AI agent says, okay, now I'm going to trigger the next step. And I think that's where that's where we're going to head to, where it's really agentic AIs coordinating the end-to-end process and allowing that kind of full automation, I think would be challenging otherwise, especially in our environment.
Nice. Oh, Digi, I wanted to ask, what's your favorite thing about artificial intelligence / automation?
Ah, what's my favorite thing?
Yeah.
Like, no, it's
And let's put it this way. Let's just say if you were, you're in a bar, you was at a pub and you're speaking to someone and someone just asked you that question. What would you say to them?
this actually happened the other day. I was at a party and I started going on about AI as the only tech guy in the party. Um,
I like the synergy right
I
now. I
think
love it.
I think what excites me is thinking about reducing the manual effort required to get things done. And I think that's where we should be thinking about with AI and automation. There are lots of things that we do which are just admin and they're routine. And we see it in our not just in our industry, in Shieldpay as well, where when people start to do things that are routine tasks, there's room for error because it's like, I'm just going to do step A, B, C, and you make mistakes. There's a typo here, you've clicked the wrong button here, and all of that. And I think what excites me about AI is it can not only start to take over those kind of tasks, but the intelligence bit is the key thing, right? It can start to think about how it can optimize and make this more effective and more efficient, right? And I think that's the exciting bit about AI is it can start to suggest ideas and ways that you can improve. And then it's up to us to then take that on board and make a decision. Do we do more with that or do we do less with that? And I think that's exciting.
Nice. And like we're seeing like countries like places like Dubai, for example. I feel like they are way ahead. I go on LinkedIn. I'm following some people on LinkedIn. Well, I'm connected with some people on LinkedIn, and they're at these events, and some of the things that they're talking about is way advanced compared to people that are based over in London. What's the skepticism? Like, what do you think it is? Why is Dubai all in on it? Why is the UK slowly behind? Well, I feel like the UK is a little bit behind. There's a bit of skepticism from a lot of people. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a theory which I'm happy to share, which is it's about revolutions, right? So if you think about when the Industrial Revolution happened, we were creating machinery to take over manual labor tasks, and it became a knowledge industry. And what we have now is a knowledge industry, right? That's where the money is, that's where the influence is, and that's a majority of people sit in the knowledge industry. Now, when we talk about what's happening now, AI is really now taking over the knowledge industry. So for us in the knowledge industry, what's next for us? What are we going to do with it? And I give you an example. We had an AI hackathon in the office, and we said, here's a set of requirements. Let's, and we'll get our engineers to use only AI tools to develop this application, right? And what everyone in tech did was they used AI to help them generate the code, right? And then AI to help them do the deployment, and AI to deploy the infrastructure, but they still had some control so they could see the code and check it in and then do what they needed to do with it. And what, let's say, people in product and I did, I took part myself on the side, is just go to something like Replit and just give it the requirements and it did everything. I didn't have to see the code. I didn't have to understand the code. So we're shifting to an era where someone can have an idea, go to an AI agent and just say, build me something. They don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. All the questions you ask, you're not thinking about scalability, you're not thinking about performance, you're not thinking about regulation, you're not thinking about reliability, you're not thinking about security, but they get an end product. And I think that's scary. And I think in our Western culture, we have that experience and knowledge, and I think there's a bit of hesitancy there. But somewhere like UAE, where I think they're giving ChatGPT free to everyone,
Yeah.
right? I don't think they're that concerned about that because I don't think they haven't built their wealth on the knowledge industry, right? They built it like, for example, oil and gas, etc.
That makes sense.
That's my theory, by the way. No, it's
No worries. I'm gonna take some things you said. I'm gonna look on social media and see who else is aligned with that. But no, that was a really good take. We generally do appreciate that. But is there any like foundations or like, well, I should say, is there any principles that you follow when you are, building out any automations or any tools?
Yeah. Certainly, I think for us and for me and my industry and my background, I think I always think about information security and compliance first, right? And it's not going to be the same in other industries, but I think for us, definitely it's starting from that foundation of what are the information security requirements, what are the compliance requirements we need to work with, and make sure that that foundation is there. Because if you start to build something and you have to retrofit that in, it can be very challenging, right? You might end up having to start again. So I always make sure, I have a ladder of priority, which I share with my team, and infosec and compliance is at the top. And then you've got to think about things like performance and scalability. And so having a foundation of those things gives you freedom to then build and innovate. But if you start with just purely, here's the functionality, and then you try and retrofit those things, I've had experience of that, just becomes very challenging. So those are some of the core things I look at.
Nice. I feel like I'm just asking these questions because I feel like it's a learning factor for us as Navvai, but I know that a lot of other people will get a lot of gems from it. So yeah, I'm just winning off questions that come into my head. But what advice would you give to other product or tech leaders looking to implement AI in the near future?
I'm going to share some advice that I got from, I think it was Fintech Live that I went to, I think earlier this year, or maybe last year, which is AI is a tool that solves a problem. And I think a lot of people are under pressure to solve any problem they have with that tool. It's like you trying to put together a shelf and you only have a hammer, and everyone tells you must use a hammer because that's the best tool in the world. But actually, you need to screw things in and you need to glue some stuff together, and you've got to solve the problem. And also don't think about, let me find a problem to solve with AI. Because you will find a problem, but it might not be a problem that adds value to your product or to your customers. So I think it's a case of looking at the problems you have, looking at what the problems you're trying to solve, and then thinking about, okay, what are the best tools for it? And is this something that AI can help with or not? And be realistic about it. In our field, we use machine learning, which is a form of AI, for transaction monitoring. And it is absolutely relevant problem. But I'm not going to manufacture a problem just so I can get AI into my platform. And I think it's important to think about that.
Yeah. Nice. So what you're basically saying is that you don't want to pluck up.
Don't say I've got to do AI if I'm going to find a problem to use AI for. Think about the problems you actually have, and then think, okay, is there an AI solution that can help me solve this problem? And I think you'll find a better fit and you'll solve your problem better that way than just saying everyone's using AI agents, therefore I'm going to stick an agent in my platform. And then you're thinking, what can I get this agent to do? And then it doesn't add value to your product or to your customers.
No, that's facts. Nice. Sounds exactly like our business model, Darnell.
A problem first approach.
But exactly.
Exactly. In a nutshell, yes.
But Digi, just before we come to a close, right? I wanted to ask you, what excites you the most about the next evolution of the Shieldpay platform?
What's exciting for me is what's happening in our industry in the UK. And in case you're not aware, so there's lots of things happening now around class action lawsuits. You've seen the stuff around the PCP, and I think you've seen emissions.
Yes, I have.
Our platform really is the only thing that, in terms of technology platforms, that can solve for the payouts of that type. Because of all the things I said earlier about needing to validate who's receiving the payment and being able to do it at speed and at scale. And I think that's going to be a big test for us, because we're shifting from the hundreds of thousands to the millions. And so there's a scale challenge there that we need to deal with. So I'm excited to test our platform out in that respect. And then also it's taking our platform to other verticals. We've been talking to some other people and they have similar challenges. You think about, you've got multi-party transactions, which are highly complex, but all of them follow the same thing, which I talked about earlier. You need to verify a bunch of people involved in the transaction. You need to hold money either in escrow or for a short term whilst all these checks are happening, and they need to be able to pay out to multiple jurisdictions, either domestically or internationally, and that applies in so many areas. Right now, we're focused more on a niche area because they need our platform the most. But I think there's other areas we can apply that to once we've I don't want to say we're not finished, but once we've settled the next wave of stuff that's happening in our industry at the moment, our target industry at the moment.
I'm with you. Once you hit that checkpoint, I got you. Nice. Well, Deji, listen, I gotta say, I'll speak on behalf of Darnell as well. But one, thank you. You most certainly have delivered, and you've dropped a lot of gems. So we're very grateful. Is there any parting message that you would have, or if people wanted to find yourself, where could they find yourself and find more about Shieldpay?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. It's Digi, Diji. Almost short for digital, but not quite with a J, not a G. Yeah, so just look me up on LinkedIn, shieldpay.com if you want to find out more about Shieldpay and what we're doing. And, let's keep innovating. That's what we're here to do as tech folks. And yeah, let's enjoy it whilst we're doing it as well.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, people, that's been another episode of the Navvai Shift. Again, I've been joined by my co-host Darnell, and our guest has been Digi. We'll link some of his information down in the description. But yeah, thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks.